just to start out, I wanted to clarify something that we kind of touched on last week. When I was talking about the organization, I used the terminology the church. And the more I thought about that, I don't like that. And the reason is, I think when a lot of people think of the church or a church, they think of, a brick and mortar little building with a steeple and a bell, and you go on Sunday and you have a uplifting experience, and you connect with your community, and then you go on about your life the rest of the week.
Right.
And I don't think that's the right verbiage to describe the organization, because it just has these fingers that kind of leach into all the other aspects of your life. We've talked about how a lot of witnesses employ other witnesses. That's really a common practice. And so it's more than just your Sunday morning or your Wednesday service. It's your job, your social circle, who you marry, who you date, what you do for a living, what education you pursue. It's just so much more than just the traditional church experience. So when we call it the organization, I mean, that really is what it is. I know that sounds so nefarious, like a crime organization, almost like the mafia or something.
Right.
But it is. I mean, it's a very intensive organization at work, not just the church. And the church can be a wonderful experience. I know it has been for me. So I don't want those terms to kind of overlap and lend a negative connotation where it doesn't belong.
And as I said before, like I'm an atheist, but it is it works both ways also, because I think when we were both Jehovah's Witnesses, if somebody said, "Oh, I'm going to church," you go, "What are you talking about?" We're going to the Kingdom Hall. We're going to the meeting. We're going and saying the organization is actually what they normally say now. Where they used to say the society, but it's
which is even worse. That sounds even more like villainous.
It does. So I think this works for both ways, because it does feel funny to call it, and then it's unclear, perhaps, like what are we talking about when we say the church? Because it's not what we would have called it back when we were witnesses. So.
Right. Anything specific on your mind this week that you want to delve into?
Yeah, I know. I had been thinking. I think we'd both been kind of thinking about just the differences between generations of people, and why we've been noticing a lot of people who are of the Generation X, later in the Generation X, like, and to clarify, that means anybody who was born, Gen X was up to 1980. I think it's from 1950 something to 1980. So we're right on the edge of that, because I'm 43. I know you're a little younger than me. Beyond that, being, millennials and Gen Z, they are all having such a trouble, or rather such an easier process getting out. Whereas older people who had been through a lot of changes, new light, are fine with recent developments and how much the organization has been changing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, baby boomers, they're just rolling with it. Just, it is what it is, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, and we were kind of thinking, I was thinking, like, kind of thinking about what could be the possible causes for that, why it is so much, I wouldn't say easier, because it's still mental work. I remember being in and having things going, I don't like that. Well, put it over here, compartmentalize it. What do you think the causes of that, of people who are maybe Gen X and older, being able to roll with these changes that really paint the organization more like televangelists than they ever used to be? What do you think?
Well, I love that you even use that phrase, televangelist, because it's just such a different organization now. They do so much television broadcasting. They've got their own, media channel, media company. And it's so funny to me, because like when I was a kid, And they talked about televangelists. Of course, they were talking about other religions, televangelists. They always called it the electric church, and talked about how that would be like the downfall of faith, when it all went digital or all went on television. But I think the reason that like the baby boomers and the older half of the Gen X group seem to be more just, rolling with the changes, to quote REO Speedwagon. I think it's because they're just used to these like bigger shifts in doctrine, or bigger shifts in belief. They call it new light when they change their stance on a certain subject. So one of the things that they kind of changed around was the belief on the generation that would see 1914. First they said that it wouldn't pass away, and then of course when all those people did physically pass away, they had to readjust their stance, and so they changed it to the overlapping generations, and things that were literal before were figurative now. And
right. And just for anybody who maybe doesn't know what that is, if they joined after that, that is an excellent point. And I'll show a graphic up here of I believe it's an Awake from 1984, where it has many elderly people that were alive and at least I believe it was 15 or 10 years old back when 1914 was happening. And they were getting baptized, and they were still, a lot of them were at Bethel. Some of them are spouses, are wives of governing body members on the cover of that magazine. I think Henschel's wife is on that magazine. And what their point is that if you were serving back in 1914, some of them will still be around when Armageddon actually comes. And
right.
of course, now we know that's absurd. Nobody from 1914 is still, out there placing magazines in 2023. And then they had to do that change. So, yeah, sorry, continue.
Oh, I mean, yeah, just thanks for clarifying that.
I mansplained.
But then other
Good
big
job,
changes, like the 1975 belief, which was kind of it was a commonly held belief. Now, I've talked to older witnesses who swore that they heard it multiple times from the platform, or from the speaker. And then I think there's maybe one place in older printed material where it does specifically mention the year 1975. That's when they believed for a long time that the end of times, or the end days, would begin, the Great Tribulation. So there was a lot of people that just thought, well, in 1974, I'm, cashing out my retirement plan, or selling my house. I'm, not going to go to college because we've only got one more year left. And then obviously 1975 came and went, nothing happened. And there was kind of like a bigger, like falling away at that time. So the people that maybe were too scared to leave stayed, but they were used to like a big shift, a big change in belief. And they just decided to just hang in, kind of like, you're too invested to go back, like you're past the point of no return. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe just prior experiences like that with big shifts are why they're more numb to it now. I don't know.
Yeah, it strikes me as a bit like owning a 1980s BMW. You have this sunk cost fallacy. You put so much money into it, and you're going to just keep going. And it is an absolute pile that is not going to go anywhere. But okay, I've been this deep into it for this long, and that's a thing that any of us can do in any any aspect rather of our lives. And to your point about the what was said officially. I actually saw a watchtower not long ago, and I will find it and pulled up on the screen here. But it said, it was in 1968 or 69, and it said, "What will the 70s bring?" And it says in no uncertain terms that the 70s will bring Armageddon.
Yeah.
And
So,
so that's what the organization was saying then. And we'll have to, maybe I'll try to, I give myself a lot of future work here, but I'll look up the scripture where it says that if you have this is how you can tell a false prophet. If they say
mm,
something it's going to happen and then it doesn't happen. And then what's interesting is what you're supposed to do with that false prophet, according to the law, is you're supposed to throw a lot of rocks at him until he stops living. So, I mean, okay, I mean, we're going to call this new light, but if we're going by the Bible, this would have been a much more violent outcome for those who made such claims about when the end was going to come. And it wasn't the only one in 75. Obviously, before it was 1951, there was another claim that was going to be from 1914 to 1951. It was going to be like, what? That was a generation. A generation is how old you have to be to grow up and really become an established adult and have children. Like 37 years they came up with for some reason. And then that's a generation.
sure.
And then, well, that didn't happen in the early 50s. The end didn't come. And so now let's do another one. They've been able to insulate the organization is just with calling it new light rather than saying, oh, we got it wrong.
Messed up.
Yeah.
Well, and I get frustrated because there's no accountability when you put that material out there and it is wrong. We've talked before about how in the 60s there's printed material that compares an organ transplant to a form of cannibalism, which sounds so outlandish.
Bizarre.
But basically they said, it would be the same as you consuming a body part of another human. So I'm 1,000% positive there was people that said, oh, you know what? I don't want the liver transplant, lung transplant, whatever. And died as a result. Well, then in the 80s, they said, maybe let's pump the brakes on the whole cannibalism analogy. And they said, well, as long as you can do it like bloodless, that organ transplant is fine. But they never said, hey, sorry, Uncle Roger didn't make it because we put this material out there and people believed it. And that just makes me angry.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. And I would imagine that in the 80s, and in fact, I know for a fact that people were far less litigious. I think there was no thought, perhaps. This is some guesswork here. No thought by the governing body who was making those changes to think, oh, you know what? If we tell them it's okay to get organ transplants, nobody's going to get litigious and start suing. Whereas now, if they change the understanding of the blood doctrine, that okay, you can go ahead and take blood because they've done little increments. If you take fractions, that's okay. Well, that's still taking blood from somebody who donated blood.
Right.
You can, and they didn't realize that when they were coming up with this stuff that in mother's breast milk there's blood cells. So obviously Jehovah doesn't. Yeah, Jehovah, a creator of the universe, again, would not have a problem with that if that's the way he's designing it. And so, but now here we are in the 2020s, and man, I think the lawsuits would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, it just devastating if people were waking up and realizing that they'd given up their child, their wife, their husband. It's just horrific. And then of course, I think the financial impact is really their main concern.
Oh, bankrupted, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, of course, for the younger half of Gen X, and the older millennials, I just made it in under the millennial wire, but just having access to the internet to verify, to share information and just verify that the experiences that you're having are not singular to you. There's other people that are, carrying that same anxiety or maybe having the same questions. Because before that, you just feel like it's just you. Like if I'm doubting what brother so-and-so says or what this article says, like it's something wrong with me. I lack faith. I, don't believe the right way. But when you have that way to interface with other believers, even if you're wanting to verify what you're saying, to, maybe you just want to validate something good that you're feeling or something good that you're believing. Just having that ability, I think, is what encourages critical thinking or, deeper analysis. And if we're in the 50s, the 60s, obviously, what are you going to do? Start a letter writing campaign? I mean, there just wasn't that way to connect with others that were possibly in a similar situation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And then that makes it, because I certainly don't want to ever give the impression that we think that this younger generation we're so much smarter,
Oh, no.
and it's not that. There's just available information.
Yeah,
When
accessibility.
my mom's parents came in the truth. I just threw up my mouth a little bit. I promised I'd never do that on this, and I just did. Like I said that, I called it that. When they joined up with the cult, hopefully that I'm just going to edit that out. When they did that, my mother was a child, and my grandmother and grandfather were completely. It was 1960 something. My dad came in the early 70s, and then there's just, I mean, I can't imagine you had somebody who's really nice and really friendly, comes to your door, shares with you stuff you've never heard before. It's really positive. Everybody's love bombing you when you get to the Kingdom Hall. And you think, wow, this is really, there's to be love among Christ followers. Look at these guys. These guys are special. And then there's
Right.
zero, now literally there is in the instructions on how to conduct a Bible study. There is very much a lot of information about don't check anybody else's thoughts on us. Don't Google. Don't check any other
Sure.
third party verification. And you imagine doing that in a sales. I'm in sales. That you do that in a sales. Just don't Google me. But go ahead and sign up with me.
Don't price shop or anything.
Crazy.
I remember this just like sparked a memory that I have really clear when you were talking about blood, and how
I do make people's minds wander. It's okay. Go ahead.
No, I definitely could go down like rabbit trails. No, I was just remembering we had like a family Bible study night, and this was in the early 90s, and there was an Awake article that was specifically about young people. It was a collection of like individual stories about children that died after refusing blood. Anyway, I just remember we studied it. We were living in Woodward, Oklahoma. We studied it as our like family study. And like one of my little friends was over at the house, and so she, sat in on the study with us. And so we each,
one of your little non-JW friends, or?
I didn't have any non-JW friends.
Okay.
No, just a little friend
So.
from the congregation. No.
Okay. I was
But
ready
my
to be
mom
shocked.
and dad wanted us. What's that?
I was just ready to be shocked. I apologize. Go ahead. Continue with the story.
Oh yeah, your mind would have been blown, but definitely no. I remember my mom and dad wanted us each to read one of the articles or one of the little like vignettes out loud. And so one of them was like a boy had leukemia, and they offered him blood as a potential therapy. And at 9 years old or 12 years old, however old it was, he stood firm in his beliefs and refused blood. And just similar stories like that. One had been in a car accident or something like that. But all these young people, by their own choice, refused the blood and then later died. And I remember I was reading one of the stories out loud to our little study group, and my dad just like burst into tears. And I had only seen my dad cry like one other time in my whole life.
Yeah, he's a stoic fellow. Plot twist.
Yeah. And he just started like sobbing. And I remember being so embarrassed because my friend was there and my dad's like boo-hooing, and he needed like a minute to like compose himself. I said, are you okay? And he's like, it just really like touches my heart to see, these young people so resolute in their beliefs. And at the time I thought like, oh, okay. Like, that's something that really impresses him, or, something that he takes real seriously. And of course, now, um, to think that I could have children that age, as the same age as any of the young people in those stories, it's like almost sickens me to think that the thing that made him emotional was not the fact that they denied the blood and died, but that they were so committed to this organization that they willingly chose death. Like, they literally martyred themselves without even realizing it. It makes me feel sick.
It is
Um,
shocking. Yeah. Do you think
yeah.
that there was any part of your dad was trying to cover? I mean, because the fact that it was a loss of life, being sad over that in front of a group of witnesses in your family, uh, that wouldn't look great. Do you think that he was really sad over that and then was trying to cover it, or do you not really have any idea?
I don't know. I mean, I
Hmm.
guess I never thought about it like that, but I just think he got emotional for the wrong reason. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm
Okay.
sure it was,
Yeah.
sad to think of a child dying. I mean, he's not
Well, sure.
heartless. I'm sure that,
Yeah.
was upsetting. Um, but
Mhm.
I'm probably close to his age now that he was then.
Mhm.
And I just see it so differently.
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And good catch on calling it family study, because that was before they changed it to be even more indoctrinating. Family worship, you have to do it as part of your worship. It's not just study.
Oh yeah, back then it was just the old family study.
I remember one family study where everybody was discussing Christmas, and all
Dun,
my
dun,
brothers and sisters
dun.
there, well, the ones that were born yet, and I was like, yeah, I at the end of it, my dad's like, so what do you think about Christmas? And I raised my hand. I like Christmas. And everybody
Sure.
else was just shocked. They're like, Jason, this is shocking. This is no.
Burn him.
Burn
Burn
him.
him at the
And I remember
stake.
my dad being like, no, no, it's okay. That's why I asked. He was real patient with it, but I still did. And I'm like, okay, sure, I get it. I still, it seems pretty silly and it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I got why they argued that you wouldn't be uh, celebrating, but now as a non-believer, I go hard with Christmas.
Well, it's funny because you know, growing up that way, you're just on this path. This path is laid out before you, and you're not aware that you can deviate left or right or backwards, or, Um, so like when I say I went hard, I doubled down on the doctrine at school, and I'm talking like first grade. And I'm just going to apologize now to everybody at Greenville Elementary, because I know I told every single person in my class Santa Claus is not real. That's like propaganda from Babylon the Great. I'm sure I really sabotaged a lot of little kids' beliefs in the
Just
big
bumming
guy.
out one West Virginia child after another,
Oh man,
huh?
sorry.
I
I'm sure they're
was
probably telling their therapist, well, it all started, my issue with JWs, it all started first grade. Sorry.
well, no, no. I think for anyone who what most people wouldn't know is that we went to the same elementary school at that time,
We
and
did.
I was in second grade when you were in kindergarten with my little brother, and I never did that stuff. Oh my goodness, I cursed like a sailor on the little baseball diamond. I learned all kinds of fun stuff. I was not as good and pure of a Christian as you were, so good job there. I
Just
I do have a vague, now that you've
yeah.
mentioned that, I do have a vague recollection of you, just packing a wall up when it came to your beliefs. But
I remember, because I just, even at a young age, I knew that was like expected, and you
mhm,
get so much praise and like accolades when you do things like that. To a kid, you like that.
mhm.
So, but
Well, even though
I
it's a
remember, I think
cult,
I told you the story about the Whitman's chocolate sampler.
mm,
Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. My little first grade class was having like a little Christmas party. It was the last day of school before Christmas break. Um, and so the teacher passed out all these coloring sheets, and it was like Santa and his reindeer, and here goes my little hand, and I'm like, oh, I cannot participate in this, you know, pagan celebration. And she kind of like rolled her eyes and she's like, all right, you can sit in the hallway. So I'm sitting alone in this like dark corridor, just chilling by myself. She brought me a book. And after about half an hour, she stuck her head out the window or out the door, and she's like, are you allowed to eat chocolate? And I said, yeah. She's like, well, I got everybody this little tiny Whitman sampler chocolate box. I think it had like 6 pieces of candy in it. She said, and it has nothing to do with Christmas. It's just candy. So I was like, heck yeah, give me that thing. So I ate, I think, like 2 or maybe 3 pieces out of it, about half of it. And I put the rest in my backpack. And then when I got home, my mom said, how was class? And I said, well, I, sat in the hallway for about an hour while they did their Christmas party. And she, of course, was like, oh, I'm really proud of you for, standing up for what's right and this and that. And of course, that, boosts my little kid ego. Well, then she's going through my backpack looking for worksheets or homework or whatever. And she said, where did this box of chocolates come from?
Oh, dear.
And I said, oh, well, the teacher gave me one, during the Christmas party since it wasn't about Santa. And she was like, do you think God would want you to eat that chocolate? So the chocolate of shame, I was just, I was devastated. I thought I had done so good. And then my little heart was broken because apparently I was not supposed to eat the chocolate. And we just threw the whole thing away.
Man, that is such a bummer. I mean, he's just completely avoiding all the war, and he slept through a couple of Holocausts, but he's going to be real upset about that chocolate this little girl ate in 2nd grade, just approaching heaven. And there's like, I see you ate some Whitmans. Is that right? Is that what you guys Whitmans?
We're going to have to convene to see whether St. Peter's going to let you in.
Yeah, we're going to have you wait over there in
the queue.
Queuing for Christ. So that we kind of deviate. I like the casual conversation style though, but I think with I feel like a lot of people in our situation are waking up, and I think that's great. And I've even seen a few people as late as in their 70s online waking up. So I think there's still hope, but it does seem like it's much more common for, once you've gotten locked in that hard to go ahead and become a lifer. I think the numbers aren't quite right. And this is part of why they're not recording the hours anymore. If you haven't heard, the hours are no longer required to record for regular, rank and file publishers. So I've noticed the cart witnessing, and every time I see cart witnessing, I see nothing but gray hair. There are no young people out doing this. I don't see young people doing any. I mean, I see young people being Mormons, but that's no JWs.
Well, I mean, I think cart witnessing is ideal for older people rather than like walking in the heat, door to door, climbing stairs. You find a nice little street corner, park your cart, get out your camp chair and your thermos of coffee, and just kind of set up shop. I mean,
I do agree with you.
That's what I'd be doing.
But I've also noticed a change because I was in a congregation here for 7 or 8 years. And I would be in the cart witnessing with my wife at the time, and we'd have younger people at the carts. And I see the same locations that are assigned to that congregation. And I see the older people I know, but I don't see the younger people anymore. And I know a lot of people have reached out to me and said, oh yeah, I've because they see my Instagram or something. And they're like, oh, I'm obviously, they can see my Halloween party. So I'm obviously not, participating anymore.
Right.
But I think you're right. There is a certain layer that it's easier for older people to do cart witnessing. But I also used to see a lot of young people doing it, and that's been a shift here, at least locally. Every time I see it, it's just well, I mean, that seems to suggest that the organization is going to age out eventually. That those people don't last forever. If you're in your 80s, I mean, that's just life. So I wonder what the next 15 years will bring, post-pandemic and post-information age. That's obviously been a much more, but it's going to be interesting to see.
when I last week or two, whenever it was that they made the announcement that you're not required to turn in your time, or to calculate your hours that you spend in ministry, I literally laughed out loud. I was in my car, I was commuting to work, and I was cracking up out loud, just cackling. The first thing I thought was that this is like, whose line is it anyway? JW edition. The rules are made up. The points don't matter. Hours don't matter. I could not even get my thoughts together, because when we regular pioneered, the monthly hour requirement, at least when I started, was 90 hours a month.
Back in my day.
Which was a lot, for when you're young and you're trying to work a job and
I did that for 5 years. That was rough.
Yeah. And then a few years later, after I had quit pioneering, they lowered it to 70 hours. And even that, I thought like, oh, couldn't hack it at 90? You're getting off easy. And then you just, over the years since, they've just lowered it and lowered it and lowered it. And, but it was so strict when we were kids. They, like, if you stopped for a coffee or you went through McDonald's drive-through, they said, don't count your time. You're not ministering if you're waiting in the drive-through. And even if you had like a long drive to get to the territory where you would be ministering, they said, the drive doesn't count. You don't start counting time until you actually knock at the first door. It was just so strict. And now they're saying, just whatever, just fine. Count it, don't count it. It's whatever.
Who cares? We weren't even counting these. We're kind of fudging on these numbers anyway. Who cares?
Like, okay, great.
Do you remember when we switched, and it was not really an organizational thing? I don't know if this happened to you locally, but you hear people say, well, I got a call nearby. He's not usually home, but I want to get my time started before we drive 45 minutes to the territory.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And everybody's like, well, yeah, let's get our time started. There's just 5 people in this car. That's basically 4 hours.
Yeah, we would usually pull up to like a truck stop. Everybody would jump out. Literally just like put a magazine in a hand of the first trucker you saw. Everybody jump back in the car and then like hit the road. So something that I thought would be interesting, just a little experiment. I had asked you the other day if you could think of maybe like one specific thing that made the childhood aspect of it so difficult or so awkward. Because I can think of several things. But I just wanted us to like compare notes. If you can think of like a specific thing before the age of 18, when you're in your childhood years, that to this day you're like, oh, that was just the worst. Like, what do you think it would be?
Oh, gosh, I don't know that I have anything really ready there. It's just kind of like when you're looking at a big pile of things and you don't know which one to pick. It's like being in Blockbuster and there's like 8 different movies you should want to watch.
So many titles.
Right. I find myself mentally wandering down the aisles and not sure which memory to pick. So I'm going to let you go first.
That's me and Netflix. I continually add the titles to my list, but then never watch those titles because I'm busy adding other titles.
Mm-hmm. Vicious cycle.
Well, I'll tell you, for me, one of the things that made it tough, difficult, like I was talking about earlier, when you try to go over the top for the organization, you get so much positive feedback. People tell you you're so mature, you're so smart, you're so brave. I remember lots of older people saying, oh, you're just like a little adult. You're just like a little sister. A sister meaning, a mature lady.
Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, you love that. Like, yeah, I am smart and grown up and all these things. So then you want to keep it going. And for me, there was just this perfectionism that I wanted to attain. I just wanted to be perfect. And it really became like a consuming part of my personality. I wanted my When I was on the platform, I wanted to be perfect. When I went in the ministry, I wanted it to be perfect. At the door, my hair, my clothes, my grades. I just wanted everything to be like just perfect. And it almost was like I wanted to be like a little, like a Stepford wife for the organization. Like I just wanted to be like a little robot where everything was perfect all the time.
Yeah.
And of course, now we're more aware of how perfectionism in children can leach into their adult lives. And all through my teenage years and all through my 20s, I had problems with eating disorders and anxiety. And I think a lot of that is because things that I can't control, that I can't make perfect, upset me.
Yeah.
And if I backtrack, I can definitely see where that started.
Yeah.
As a kid.
That's interesting. Yeah. That has a huge impact on you later in life too. So yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I think I came up with something here that it came to mind while you were saying that. When I was a kid, I kind of went the opposite direction where I knew it was weird to me. Like then, mostly because of, I mean, it's all I knew. So it's pretty normal being a Jehovah's Witness kid, not celebrating the holidays, not saluting the flag. I don't know that I'd salute the flag now. It seems a little bit of a peculiar thing to pledge your allegiance to any individual country. But I had all this this feeling that like this is kind of odd. Like I have to walk out of the room when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comes on Tuesdays because that's what we watch for 20 minutes as a reward. And I'm like, okay, I don't really care, but it just seemed it made me an outcast. And then I really worked very hard, I think, in elementary school to make sure that my Jehovah's Witness life really didn't mix too much. Like I said before, I had my best buddy. We were swearing together, and I'd go home, and it made me pretty duplicitous. I would go home and try to be a good witness, but I'd also know, and I would be stressed because I knew I wasn't doing it right. I wasn't being good enough. And then my older sister and then my older brother are subsequently getting baptized at 12, I think 11, 12, and 13 years old, somewhere in there. And the pressure's on me at 12. Yeah. Was it 11? Yeah. And 11, then, so I had all that stress of I need to be really good here. And then, but I'm not doing it because I do sense that this isn't right and this is odd. And there's a lot of things that don't have answers why we don't do, or at least ones that make sense. So that made me feel very anxious and stressed. And then it only got worse with puberty because, as you know, from, the teachings of the organization is you're not supposed to have impure thoughts of any kind. Well, that's all a 12-year-old boy has. He's just a walking mess, a nightmare. Yeah. If you have a 12-year-old boy in your house is disgusting. But it's not their fault. We shouldn't be mean to them, but hormones. Hormones. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it was just, and then that led to, and this is what the link was, it led to me trying to control my body by not eating. And when there's 6 kids, you can pretty easily, even though everybody's having dinner most nights at the table, you can work it out. And so I would punish myself for any infraction where this is when I started becoming more aware that I need to somehow compensate and do a little like John Calvin on myself for thought crime. Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't even doing anything. I didn't have a little girlfriend. I didn't have anything. I was just at thought crime. I would just have to I would have to compensate by not eating because I didn't want to tell anybody, but I thought I still have to show God that in Jehovah that I'm serious. And so I would go 24 hours with no food. And that didn't hurt me. I never looked better. I was really, really trim, but I'm not serious about eating disorders. They're obviously horrific, but I was like 15 and the same height that I am now. And I would say 75 pounds lighter than I am now. And it wasn't a big deal, but I guess it was, it was a real thing that was happening because I couldn't live up to that standard. But of course, your parents, when they don't really see that happening, they just assume, oh, everything's fine. You know, they got 6 kids.
Right.
And as we've said before, my parents and yours, very loving people, really deeply committed to what's best for their children. But a cult makes everything worse, because then the natural inclinations of a pubescent teenager and also just wanting to fit in at school all make you a sinner. And then you can't really, you just can't really live that way in a mentally healthy way.
I think it's interesting how you and I had like mirror or converse experiences at school.
Was I the
like
bad angel on the shoulder and you were the good one?
Like you were kind of like letting your hair down when you were, out of everybody's sight. And I was more anxious at school because I felt like I said, like I had to just double down on everything. And I remember, in addition to the fact, people stare at you, you don't salute the flag, you don't hunt Easter egg, like you don't do any of like the, fun things. You don't go to prom. Not that prom is a pagan celebration, but you're told not to associate with any of your peers outside the congregation. So you're already so awkward and cut off and antisocial almost.
No sports.
But then on top of that, no sports, no cheerleading. But then on top of that, when you go, I remember going to the meeting and from the platform, the brother that was conducting the meeting said, if you're a school age witness, and you attend public school, which not everybody did, then you have your own territory. You have your own special assignment to convert or, minister to everyone around you.
No pressure, right?
So then on top of the awkwardness, now you've got this pressure like, oh, there's a special assignment, specifically for me. So you really just keep digging that hole for yourself as far as just awkwardness and not fitting in and anxiety and just all that.
And Anthony Morris, the former governing body member, wasn't the first one to say that if you haven't been out in service, there's blood on your hands. Has it been a week or two? There's probably blood on your hands, is what I remember he said. And that was a thing we heard. This is your territory, and it's your obligation to save these people and save these kids, which is admonition I promptly ignored, but you took to heart. I think you might be a better person than me. But it was just so much pressure for a kid. And then you don't think about, wait a minute, why isn't God saving these kids? Was he just waiting for me to? That's a lot of work for
a lot of pressure. It's a lot on the shoulders of a 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old.
It's nuts. Well, I think I had another topic, but I want to ask you, maybe you want to save it for next time. I was kind of talking about what maybe made us wake up, and I kind of found that from researching the history of the actual organization.
Definitely think that would be, interesting to compare each other's like
notes there,
aha moments.
Yeah.
But I will say, I'll share with you just a funny little mini story.
Yeah, go.
That kind of started like that domino effect. I was regular pioneering. This is in the late 90s, like maybe 1999, 98, 2000 maybe. And me and my pioneer partner were at this house, this elderly gentleman. Anyway, we gave our little presentation and he said, what do you think about that mansion that you guys own in California? And of course I had no idea what he was talking about. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses own a mansion in California.
San Diego.
And he said it's for the prophets when they come back. So internally, as he's saying this, of course, I'm laughing like, okay, obviously this elderly gentleman is, crazy. So we kind of wrapped up our conversation. And when I got back to the car, I was repeating to my pioneer partner's mother what he had said. And I said, have you ever heard anything like that? And she said, vaguely. She's like, but I think that's just all nonsense. So then, fast forward 20 years or whatever, turns out they did have this huge mansion in California. Of course, now it's public knowledge. Beth Sarim was this huge, like hilltop estate that they thought the resurrected prophets were going to live, and the president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society lived there for a while, and it was just this sprawling estate. But I mean, when I say I had never even heard it, that's an understatement.
Same boat. Yeah, I like that. This is like a 5 years ago thing. I'm like, what? And you just realize, oh, he just wanted to live there. Which leader was it? Was it Rutherford? I have to look it up. Just wanted to live in a fancy house, basically, is what he wanted.
Sure.
Well, we need this big mansion for all the rooms for the prophets, because Moses is going to need an abode. Come on, buddy.
Well, apparently they went to some pretty great lengths. They planted trees that were like indigenous to Israel, trees that wouldn't typically grow in California, because they wanted to make it more homey, more
soften the blow for them.
Familiar, I guess. But of course, I was laughing, like when I did my research as a critical thinking adult. I instantly thought of that man from at least 20 years prior. And I thought, oh my gosh, I wrote him off as like a kook. And
I wonder if he was an ex. He just wasn't telling you when he.
I mean, I'm not going to say he was firing on all cylinders, because he also tried to convince me of the legitimacy of cockfighting.
Sure.
That's not a joke. That part's serious. He tried to convince me why it shouldn't be illegal, and PETA shouldn't give him such a hard time about it. So I'm not going to say he was a great reference point for all things moral, but he did have the scoop on Beth Sarim. So.
That's upsetting. Now, hamster fighting, on the other hand.
I'd like to compare notes on the aha moment next time.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. Well, this has been Difficult Childhood. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
It's been fun.
And as always, we said this to Fred, our single listener, last time, but if there's a subject that you feel like doesn't get discussed enough, there's so many amazing channels on YouTube that discuss various topics related to Jehovah's Witnesses or growing up in that environment. But if there's a specific topic that you're interested in, or you would like to hear our viewpoint on, or hear it discussed more in depth, just leave a comment, shoot us a message, and we will hopefully incorporate it into a future episode.
Absolutely. I think it's worth mentioning that our last episode got enough views to be equivalent to one Kingdom Hall full. Now, of course, that is minute on YouTube land, but we don't mind. It's fun to do. It's fun to talk to you, yeah, it's a nice time. But and if it is make anyone feel better about where you came from, or it goes, yeah, I had that experience too, or you want to share your experiences in the comments, we'd love that.
Yeah, that makes it worth it.
All right, bestie, I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye, friends.
Bye.